Yesterday, the killer of George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, was sentenced to 270 years in prison by the judge. He was also given credit for time already served.
Mr. Chauvin, as to count one, based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2 paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute section 609.04, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You are granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis. Anything further from the state?
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or whichever custody is currently holding him. Anything from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill could have given him a maximum of 40 years in prison, but decided on 22 and a half. One of the reasons he made the decision, he said, was his particular cruelty and abuse of authority in the killing of George Floyd. In a break from tradition, the judge wrote out a lengthy 22-page document, or memorandum opinion, detailing why he chose the sentence he did. He did this instead of giving it on the spot. Judge Cahill decided that it would be inappropriate to read it at the time of the sentencing. That sentencing order contained some very interesting words. 1. That Mr. Chauvin abused a position of trust and authority. 2. That Mr. Chauvin treated George Floyd with particular cruelty. 3. That children were present during the commission of the offense. And 4. That Mr. Chauvin committed the crime as a group with the active participation of 3 other individuals, former Minneapolis police officer Thao Thao, Thomas Lane, and J. Alexander Kuhn, who all actively participated with Mr. Chauvin in the crime in various ways. The prolonged nature of the asphyxiation makes this offense different in kind than, for example, a near instantaneous death by gunshot, which is one typical scenario for this type of offense. And it's very true that this was a very cruel situation. Now, there were 4 victim impact statements. In another break of tradition, the youngest person I've ever seen, and the commentators on various cable news networks had ever seen, was Derek Chauvin's 7-year-old daughter, who testified to the impact on her life via Skype. George Floyd's other son and other people spoke up on how the death of the man affected them. And in another unusual turn of events, Derek Chauvin's mother testified to Derek Chauvin's character. She said that he was a good man, that he enjoyed being a police officer, and that he had dedicated his life to serving the community, and asked the court to take into consideration how sentencing her son would affect her. Now, in this case, the actual sentence was more than I thought it was going to be. I had actually expected it to be only 15 years, but the judge chose 22 and a half. When you read this document that the judge put out, he said that 40 years would be inappropriate because this was like a kind of a first offense. Well, first offense that he was ever caught for. and therefore you could not justify a 40-year, 30-year prison sentence. Regardless, he's going to be going away for 22 and a half years, minus time served, minus possible parole after X amount of time. So there you have it in a nutshell. He was given at least what was almost a life sentence for the killing of George Floyd. Now, many people were very angry and said that they wanted a much greater sentence for this, something much, much longer. But the judge made the ruling that he was going to make and left it at that, and gave his reasons in a full, detailed 22-page document. Now, the recess he took to make his decision on how long George Floyd would be sentenced was about 20 minutes, because I was watching it live. Now, obviously, he could not have put out a 22-page document in that time with all of the court, without citing the previous case law for why he made that decision. He would have had required a significant amount of time to put this together. So I believe that this document was written before he even came into court that day, and probably had already decided what he was going to rule before that time. But of course I can't know that for certain because I'm not the judge. I wasn't there when the decision was made. Now, this obviously exists within the context of a larger social situation, and that is dealing with police brutality and police killings within the United States. Now, the judge did say that this was not going to be related to that this was not going to be something to set an example or set a precedent, or to specifically said that this will not be used to send a message. He's making his decision based purely on law and the existing case law that already exists. In other words, he's going directly by the book without going into anything political. And I think he made that decision for a reason. If he had done this to set an example and make a really long sentence, that would have given Chauvin grounds to appeal. Because his lawyer could have turned around and said, well, look at the sentence. This isn't going according to case law. This isn't going to the standard procedure. He's being deliberately hard on me for the actions of other people. And then his lawyer could make all kinds of arguments why the sentence should be overturned. And then he'd probably get a much lighter one afterwards. So I think the judge made the right call in this case to not give anything that Chauvin's lawyer would be able to use to justify an appeal. Now, it's very interesting watching the reaction of many people to the death of George Floyd himself, in that a lot of justifications were made for George Floyd dying. Well, he was fentanyl this, he was previous criminal history that, and the fact that he died, without actually coming out and saying it, and sometimes actually coming out and saying it, that he somehow deserved it. Okay, here's the problem. It is not the job of the police to be judge, jury, and executioner. This is not Judge Dredd. This is not a dystopian future yet. Police are not there to hand down sentences or to make judgments on innocence or guilt. That is for a judge to do. Even if someone is guilty, the police are not there to render that, and they're not there to be the executioner. These are some of the most basic fundamental principles of justice in an imperfect justice system, but one that can exist within the United States. Innocent until proven guilty. The police aren't there to be executioners, they're there to make the arrest. They're not there to be the judges. So killing George Floyd is wrong, regardless of anything George Floyd did previously, because that's not their job. But that fact was lost on a lot of people who wanted to justify his death in this manner, simply because out of racial hatred. If they were white, I sincerely doubt that they would have said the same thing. But nonetheless, to finish this story, Derek Chauvin has been sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison, minus time served, for his killing of George Floyd. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.